Unlock the secrets, learn new tactics, and build a winning strategy to win the aging game. Welcome to the Aging Game with Bruce and Susan.
All right, welcome to episode 10, Looking into the Crystal Ball. And this is pretty exciting. It's our final episode of our very first season. So I can't believe it's gone by that fast. And today we wanted to do something a little different and, try to summarize our first season, but in a great way that can be really impactful to our listeners. So today we're going to give you what we think are the top 10 topics that you need to be discussing to help you, create or even maybe revisit a strategy that you already have. So we're pretty excited to go through and give our professional opinions to all of you today.
It's great to be here, Susan. Great to see you.
Yeah.
I guess blue is the color today.
Yeah, we did. Blue,
So
way to go.
nothing, no memo on that, but it's great to be here, and I think we're gonna have a little fun today. So
Yeah.
I know I have some stories to share, of course, and but I think we're gonna have some fun. It's amazing that our season. We've gone through our whole season. We've had some great guests, and ready to get through it.
Yeah, I'm excited to think about a couple things that, maybe we've forgotten about and really help people build that great outline. But before we get started, I wanted to kind of, speaking of doing things a little different, change it up here. So obviously we're new to podcasting. So, thank you to everyone that's made it this far to episode 10 with us. But, thinking back, through the season, I thought it would be fun to share like our favorite moments or something that was funny that maybe our listeners didn't see or missed or want to remind them of. So how about you start us off?
So I've had many favorite moments, and it's hard to encapsulate all of them all at one time. But I think when we had Mitchell Dannenberg here, and he said, the little fine print, don't leave this to the professional, or leave this to the professionals. Don't try this at home. And and I think that's so true about what we do. And we always tell people, don't trust the internet, talk to the local professionals. But to me, that had a lot of meaning behind it, because there's so many great resources in our area, and people need to tap into that.
They really do. Mitchell was a hoot. I love him. He's full of personality, and he's definitely, like they say, he's no insurance guy you've ever met before.
No, and I had to cut him off a couple of times, but it was good. It was good stuff, and Marla was great. Ed was great. We just had some great people, and it's very exciting.
It's been fun. Definitely hard to pick a favorite. But definitely a moment I think that struck a personal chord with me was Dr. Linden. So before we started filming, we were all just talking about music, and you two kind of play these odd games of, who's your favorite singer from Europe or whatever. And I'm like, how do you guys know this? Like, it's wild, and talking about it. And I love the 80s music. I don't know anything current. If I could just listen to the 70s and 80s, I'd be happy as could be. And he's like, I have a present for you. And I'm like, a present for me? We've just met. This is wild. And he's, after the episode, I'm going to get you a present. Okay. So the episode's done. He's like, come on out to the truck with me and go out. He gave me a t-shirt and a bandana from REO Speedwagon, and he had just recently been to their concert. I was so excited about this. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd, been given in a long time. I actually wear it all the time. And I'm sure people are like, do you even know who they are? Yes, I absolutely do. And I love it. So that was really cool.
What a fun guy. What a fun guy. His wife is the same.
Oh.
And, to think that you can have fun going to the dentist.
Yeah.
It just kind of blows your mind, because like I actually look forward to seeing him. And, he could be, giving a filling or whatever, and we're talking about favorite bands from Europe, and so he's a good guy, and definitely a favorite moment as well.
Well, I definitely made my appointment to see him, so I will be switching. And before I go, I'm definitely going to brush up on some music trivia, because I can't disappoint.
You definitely need to be up on it. And
so what's another funny moment you had?
So another funny moment I had, I just think that talking to Marla was a riot. I think Marla is such a, she's just wonderful, but she's a lot of fun with Marla. I had fun with Ed. It just, there's just so many. And so how about you?
Well, when Marla was here, I think what was fascinating for me is, I think some of the topics we've had, people think, oh, you brought a dentist, that might be boring. And he was a hoot. I mean, that was amazing. Not only did we learn so much, but he's full of personality, and that was great. And it was the same thing with Marla. I thought like downsizing, kind of a sad topic, a little. She brought so much life to it, so much passion. She's amazing. But I loved, it's so funny. I actually, I'll share, we'll put it up on the screen for you, but there's a still from the episode, and you're next to me and I'm cracking up. The look on my face in the still photo was hilarious. And it was when you were telling your nutcracker story with her about the nutcrackers you had. And I'm not gonna divulge all the funny parts of that. You guys should go back and listen. It was episode 8, but that was the hardest I'd laughed in such a long time. And the funny part behind it is that I actually love nutcrackers. So that was so funny. I loved it. She was a hoot. I love that you shared that. And I think everyone should go back and listen to that episode if they missed it.
It's so funny. It's such a great story. And, it's so funny because what is a Jewish guy doing with nutcrackers?
I mean, that and that's funny. I think the still photo is when you said that, because I literally look at you and I'm like cracking up. But that was such a great episode. And I think that downsizing can be such a tough subject. And she does it with such heart, with such joy. And she was a delight. And thank you, Marla. I did buy the hangers.
So, I think as we start, looking back on our first season, I've had this story that I wanted to share, and so I finally get to share this story, my frog story. I know I've been telling you, Susan's saying like, Bruce, what's the frog story? What's the frog story? So here it is. So, and again, this is something, it's just a story, but it's a cute little story with a lot of meaning. And again, I've never done this at home, so I'm not some crazy person that does this to frogs. So, but it's just a story. But if you take a frog and you put a frog in boiling water, the frog will immediately jump out. The water's hot, frog will jump out. But if you put a frog in lukewarm water and you gradually turn the heat up on the range, the frog will cook himself to death. The frog doesn't realize that the water around him is too hot. And that's what happens when people stay at home too long, or they don't have a plan for the future, or they, either they have dementia and they don't realize what's going on around them. But that is what happens is people, end up, the water starts to boil and people, bad things happen. So that is my frog story. I say it a lot.
Wow.
And I think it has a lot of meaning with what we do.
I'm glad that you saved that for this episode. That is, I think, a great way to really help us summarize the season. I think people do wait too long, and that's interesting. If it's hot, they know to jump out, but if they start cool and go up, they'll cook themselves to death. I mean, that's a perfect analogy. I'm going to have to remember that one.
That's my story. And, it's interesting. It's kind of weird, but I saw something in the news the other day that in Marco Island, they found a foot-long cane toad, which is disgusting. But so again, I've never done this to frogs, so don't think Bruce is some weirdo that boils frogs, but it does have a lot of meaning behind it that, if you wait too long and you don't, it's kind of like you can't see the forest through the trees. It's that same type of thing. Is if you're too close to it, then you don't realize what's going on around you. And, I know I shared the story about my mom. My mom was 94 years old, lived at home, adamant about not moving anywhere. And, it just, all these things started happening. She had a water leak in her kitchen, and we walked in there and water was everywhere. And it's just that, the water around her literally was boiling, and she didn't realize it. So, and that's what happens with a lot of people.
Very true. Very true. It actually ties into, me, I got to have a stat. So today's is, I thought, pretty fitting for the episode. I've been hanging on to this one for a while to share today. So it comes from a University of Michigan study that was on healthy aging. So they surveyed adults age 50 to 80 on how much they thought about how they wanted to age. So 15% stated that they had given how they want to age a lot of thought. And I thought, wow, 15%. Okay. 38 said they had given it just some thought. 26% said they'd given it little consideration, and 21% said they'd given it no consideration at all.
So basically, 47% of the people of those
Yeah.
stats really haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
They put it in a little drawer and they said,
Yeah.
I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
So talk about denial.
Yeah. Is that, I mean, reading those numbers, I was like, wow. And then I kind of thought it was funny, like, wow, they really broke it down to like no, little, some, a lot. I mean, really, it's have you thought about it or have you not? But yeah, about half the people really haven't thought about that. And that really struck me.
Well, denial isn't the river that runs in Egypt.
Very true. I mean, this is just, wild. So,
So, I know as we start getting into this and we're going to do our top tens.
yeah.
And so I just want to kind of tie this a little bit back into chess. And so the chess quote is that, you want to be a chess player, not a chess piece. And really what that means is that you want to be proactive, you want to have a strategic plan, you want to be part of that plan. And so you just don't want to be, sitting idly in the state of denial. You want to be actively involved, developing your plan, communicating with your family, doing all the right things, and not just be passive.
Wow. Very good. Definitely a great way to wrap it all up for us.
When experience matters the most, Senior Housing Solutions uses over 30 years of industry knowledge to provide expert advice for those considering a move to a senior living community. We are the matchmakers of senior housing. Call today at 239-595-0207 for your free consultation.
Alrighty. Welcome to the Gambit. So we are going to dive into it today and help you look into the crystal ball.
So we're going to share our top 10. It's sort of like the David Letterman of the top 10.
Yeah.
So maybe I think we're not going to go from 10 to 1, but we're going to go 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And it's really not in any order, but just, what we picked up as our top 10 conversations, and what we, thought was very important to everybody in this process.
Definitely. I love to ask my favorite question every episode, but today I'm going to change it and put a little spin on it. So I'm going to ask you, what is something you learned this season that you didn't know prior?
Besides that, podcasting is not easy.
Right.
Podcasting is hard, and there's a lot of moving pieces, and and the other part is that you're so organized, and
you
all
can say
don't
it,
know
OCD.
You don't know this, but she's very organized, and this would not be happening without you. But I think what I've learned is that there are a lot of resources in our area, and we're just tipping. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I think starting out, I was thinking like, who are we going to get to talk, and who are we going to speak, and all that. And as this is going on, it's like, we've just opened the box on this, and there's so many different topics, and I know we're looking forward to season 2, and there's just so many topics that we're gonna address, and we're just the season 1 was just the start of it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and it gets me kind of thinking, as you hear a topic, you think, oh yeah, is that boring? I don't know. And I just think, I mean, everybody that we've had come on has just, lit up. They've had so much passion. We've learned so much. They've been great. And I'm so excited for all the other topics we want to bring to the listeners. So yeah, we've just scratched the surface a little this season, but we kind of really did a hard launch because we had some great guests. I mean, everybody was top notch. So,
and I think as these guests that we've had, not only are they knowledgeable and informative about their field, but they're and you just said it, they're passionate and they care, and those things, knowledge, passion, and caring. Wow, what a great thing.
It's interesting if you kind of think back through everybody that we had, they all have that similar thing. And, I think maybe it was a Dr. Linden. He said, like, I want to be on the journey with you. And that, I remember when he said that stuck into me. But I think about, Ed had a very similar message, on that journey with you. It's not just today that we're doing your documents. It's an ongoing process in a relationship. And each of our guests had that, mentality. Mitchell, he's there with people. And then when they need to open claims, he's, a part of that journey. I loved that everybody's on the journey with you. They're a part of that, and they're your partner in aging. And that was a great theme through everybody.
And I know, like, even with Marla, I know what she does is not easy. And, when she's going through and helping people, and it's, there's, emotions and everything involved, she is on that journey. And I've worked with her for many years, and she, is hand holding people through that entire process. So very passionate, very caring, very knowledgeable from everyone.
Everyone. I think if I was going to say something I learned this season, I'm going to take it, kind of to a professional remark. I think that it's easy as professionals, especially those of us that have been in the industry, a long time. We meet such wonderful people. We know all resources that are in the community. I've known you for quite a long time. I know what you do. And I would like to say that I know a few things about senior living communities. I can talk to you about the differences between independent and assisted in memory, but I'm not the expert, right? And I think having the guests every episode, when we were done filming, I always walked away thinking, I love that I learned something. I took something here. But when I'm engaging with, a potential client or someone in the community that's looking for advice, take my advice on home care, because I am the expert in that. But don't take my advice on housing. Take my recommendation that you need to call Bruce. Don't take my advice on legal. Take my recommendation that you should call Ed. I think as professionals, we need to remember what our lane is. And sometimes when we think we know everything, I wonder what harm are we potentially causing by not really explaining or knowing the things. And I've been here in Southwest Florida, doing home care for 11 and a half years. And to me, that's a long time, but I know in a professional career, that's, a little bit of time. But my eyes were, open, much wider through some of our wonderful guests, and really reminded me that, I want to refer the experts.
It's so true. It is so true because, and I hear it all the time. Like, I'm moving to this place because my neighbor told me it was a nice place. And it's like, well, does your neighbor really know about that place? Does the neighbor know about staffing and the financial stability and the quality of care?
Right.
No, and it's just like, and I hear it all the times. Or if it's a real estate professional who is, recommending home care, it's like, just like you said, stay in your lane, do what you're supposed to do it well, and,
I think
excel at that.
Yeah. And it's important. I think in any profession, especially I think in healthcare, I think we have a responsibility to the client or the patient or the people that we're working with, to give them all of the right information and, remove our opinions or thoughts from that. And that can be very hard. We're out and we have these relationships. And I think that was my real big takeaway from working with all these experts is, I really want to talk to you about home care all the time. I love home care. But then I really want you to talk to Bruce about senior facilities and really understand, because there's so much. I mean, I can pull one layer of the onion. He can pull the whole onion.
So, I just thought of an expression that a prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
Oh.
So you wouldn't go, to your doctor saying, I need this medicine. He's going to need to, figure out why you need this medicine. And so he's not going to prescribe something until he understands what's going on. And, and so this is the same type of thing, is that, you don't want to, prescribing something to someone without fully understanding what their whole situation is really is malpractice. And so you really need to, I think the professionals that we have take the time to get to know their people, get to know who they are, get to know, what's going on in their life, get to know their lifestyle, all those things, all those factors before they can make a recommendation. So it's a really good expression. And
I like it.
So
I'm going to make a sign that says that. So it's Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
Correct.
Beautiful. You're
Yeah.
full of it today.
I
That and the
am.
frog. I mean, come
I'm
on.
on today.
Wow. My hand is going to hurt by the end of this episode writing everything down. Wow. Good stuff.
So let's get into Susan. So why don't you start us off about your the top 10.
Yeah. So, when we were thinking about this, I was trying to figure out, our first episode was about creating the strategy and really when, right? And I was trying to figure out, how should I tell you when you should start? Everybody, the message is start now. You can never start too soon. But to put it in perspective, I would encourage everyone to ask themselves this question. And whether you're, you're an adult child, whether you're the spouse of an aging couple, or you're a professional, I'd say ask yourself this. If I fell today and had a major injury, what would happen? What would I need to do? And then part 2 of that is, what's the follow-up to that? What steps do I need to take to have that in place? Specifically, for me, I hear it so many times from clients that call, oh, I got a call last night, my dad fell in the middle of the night, or my mom is in the hospital and, I'm in, Illinois. So I think that's really the perspective is, we want to help you not have to make decisions in crisis mode. So if a crisis happened today, are you set up and prepared, or do you have a little work you need to do?
And there's a lot of pre-planning that can be done. A lot. I just think if you fell,
Yeah.
I guess the first question is, can you get off the ground?
Yeah.
And so that's the big question. Can you get off the ground? Who are you going to call? What are you going to do? And we told stories about people, falling, being on the ground for hours,
Mm-hmm.
not being able to call 911, not being able to get to their, medical alert device that people don't even use.
Yeah.
And so, that you got to ask that question. So it's a fundamental question, is that, if something happens in the middle of the night, what's going to happen?
Anything can happen, but are you prepared for that? And if you're not, then we want to help you be prepared, and kind of, dig into that today.
So it's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's another one for you today.
Yeah, and it was shocking. I mean, it doesn't fall playing pickleball, but falls getting into the car.
So my number 2 was, the number 2, our next segment was destination, where you're going to live. And, obviously, being in senior housing, I'm in favor of senior housing for many reasons.
Yes.
But for some people, it may not be the right answer. But, you need to think through that about, where do you want to live? Do you want to live with your kids? Do your kids want you to live with them? Is that something feasible, practical? Do you want to live up north? Do you want to live down here? Do you want to live, Naples, Fort Myers, Cape Coral? You got to figure those things out, and start narrowing it down from there. And so you need to, do you want to live on a cruise ship? And just speaking of that, I heard about a cruise for caregivers and people who have dementia. So
Really?
people want information on that.
I'll
I
look this
have
up.
information on that. It's pretty cool. But, you need to think about, where do you want to live? Have that conversation with your family. Think about, what are the implications of that? And then once you figure out geographically where you want to live, then, what are my options? Should I stay at home? And if I'm going to stay at home, what resources are available for me to stay at home and age in place and sustain myself in my home? Or, should I consider a senior living community? And what options are available for that? So destination is a very important thing. And I know we said it in the segment, I do get calls from people and say, I'm researching, all the places on, along the eastern shore, or eastern side of the United States. And, I think people need to think through that, because, do you want to live in North Carolina? Do you want to live in South Carolina? Do you want to live in, Boston, usually there's a draw, and usually there's a reason why someone wants to move to Naples, or someone wants to move to
Mm-hmm.
Fort Myers. Usually there's a reason why. And, yes, it could be golf, it could be pickleball, it could be the beaches and the water and all that. But usually there's, I have family, I have friends. Usually there's a reason, or the medical. Usually there's something behind just the physical location.
Yeah, I think when people think about destination, I think that they automatically think like home or community. And it's such a deeper conversation, as you said, picking, your city, your state, is that with family? Is it not? Those, really got to dig deeper and start and then kind of work out. It's not as simple as home or community.
And let me tell you, if as I said, during our segment, is that, if your plan is to move in with your kids, you better call them immediately and let them know that.
Yeah.
They need to probably pack up and move out of town if that's your plan. So
Yeah, I mean, there's people think about it. My grandmother lived in Georgia, and my mother and her siblings were deciding to relocate her to be near family because there was really no family there. But, everybody kind of wasn't stable in the sense of, their careers had opportunity for relocation. But my uncle was the one that was, had the most roots or whatever. So, she moved to the city that he was in. And I think now, and I think that was really forward thinking of them because, my mom, we would have loved for my grandmother to live near us, but it wasn't practical. My dad was in the Secret Service, and we had relocated a couple times, and that was always a possibility in the future. And you don't want to move someone somewhere in the aging, and then are you leaving them alone there, or are you having to move them again? So there's so many things that really
it's
tie into destination. You got to dig deep.
so it's interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. We were on the tennis court, and his parents live in a senior living community. And he said, Bruce, I feel sorry for people who don't have family that are checking on their parents. He says, because I go there, and it's a very nice place, but I go there, and my parents get a little extra, get probably better care because I'm watching over that. And so having, that when you start thinking about destination of being close to your kids or having an advocate, all those things are part of that equation. And I do feel bad for people who are alone or don't have family involvement, and they're in a care
No.
setting and no one's checking on them.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's not real pretty.
Yeah, and I think too, destination, if you're saying, well, I live in Naples, I want to stay in Naples and I want to stay in my home, that's lovely. But is your current home practical for your aging needs? Is it, too big? Is it too small? Do you need to make any modifications in the bathroom or the kitchen? What would need to be done to have that be a safe environment as you age? Or do you need to explore a different home in the area, and then working with a professional that does that can, discuss modifications and home safety, I
Or
think is so important.
or if you live on a second story and you got to walk
Mhm.
upstairs,
Great point.
and maybe you got to start thinking about a first floor.
Yeah.
And because if you can't get upstairs, up and downstairs, or if it's rainy and those stairs are slippery, you
Yeah.
got a problem.
Even stairs inside the house.
Yep.
So yeah, great point.
So we're going to talk about number 4, exploring care options. And I think about when you start thinking about your future care needs, um, I think statistically you got to recognize that, the majority of people, probably, 3/4 of the people are going to need care at some point in their life. And, that could be short term care, it could be a little bit of care, it could be long term care. So,
Mhm.
recognizing that you're going to need care at some point in your life, what is your plan? And you can't have your head in the sand saying, it's never going to happen to me. I'm just going to not wake up someday. Statistically, you're going to need care. And so, this is a very important consideration. I think, and what I see often is that a lot of times people forget about the surviving spouse. And so a lot of times the caregiver is taking care of the spouse, and then the spouse passes away, and now all of a sudden there's a surviving spouse, and many times it's the wife, and she all of a sudden is left with a big house and doesn't have a plan in place to protect her. um, a lot of the financial affairs, many times the husband has been taking care of that, and all of a sudden this is on the wife's shoulders. So a lot of times people fail to understand that piece of this puzzle about protecting the surviving spouse. Women outlive men. Statistically, women outlive men. So, as husbands, we have to think about that and say, what are we going to do to protect our wives? What are
Yeah.
we going to do to make sure that if something happens to me, or when something happens to me, what is my wife's plan?
Yeah.
So that's a very important part of this entire equation.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that was a big, um, something that hit home, I think, for me was thinking about that, women do outlive men. And the statistic is that that's probably more likely than the other. And you have to make sure that you're doing things. I think as we're talking about, exploring what your care options are, the statistics do point everyone is going to need something short term, long term, little bit here, there. So understanding those options, understanding what's out there is so important for you.
And unfortunately life isn't perfect, and you know something's going to happen to one,
Yeah.
and so you got to think through that, and just and I think the whole purpose of our whole podcast is to
Yeah.
think about getting people to think about all these important types of questions, because these are the things that have to be addressed, and
Yeah.
not easy to have these conversations.
No.
But you gotta think about it.
You really do. And, the conversations are not easy. And, I think that this can be an overwhelming topic in general, which I think kind of ties into what our next point is, which is, um, community resources. So many times I hear people and they think that they're in this aging journey alone. I think we've touched on it, and we know this isn't a sexy topic. This isn't something you're grabbing a beer and talking to your friends about. But it should be. And why isn't it? We talk to our friends about everything else. Why would we not talk about our aging journey or our parents' aging journey or whatnot? And I think that one thing that we really need to consider as we, get older is, engagement, resources, what's in the community, and understanding, maybe you would benefit from a support group, maybe a safe place to laugh or cry, or maybe an art class or pet therapy, or there's wonderful programs in the community that are built for the person living with a dementia and their spouse. There's all these resources out there. You don't have to be in this journey alone. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. And, you can find your community, and it does exist. But I think as a whole, we should all, do better at trying to remove the stigma from these conversations, because the more people are comfortable talking about this, the more they're going to talk about it at a sooner age, put together a plan, and do that.
So there are, the resources, some of them are free.
Yeah.
And so
So
there are
many.
so many resources. We are
Mm.
really blessed in this area to have so many resources to help seniors, to help caregivers, to help families, and I think again it kind of goes back to our overall message about being proactive, and that there's things you can research today before you start needing care. Is there meal delivery?
Mhm.
Is there have you tried an Uber or a Lyft for transportation? Because there could be a point where you're decreasing your driving.
Mhm.
So have you tried that? um, you can research home health care companies today, even before you need home care. That way you can interview the people and get to know, and they get to know you. You can get yourself on a waiting list someplace. You can, there's a lot of things from, support groups. There's just so much in this area
Yeah.
that you can tap into, and you should.
Yeah.
There's nothing, and the medical alert devices, I fall and I
Oh,
can't get up
yeah.
things, for the $30 you pay a month for that, knowing that there's 24-hour emergency response, is well worth the investment.
Oh,
So, again, look at these things today, research these things today. Um, Veterans benefits, all those things,
oh,
you can be looking at these things today,
yeah,
way before you start needing anything.
sure.
Because the
There's
last thing you want to do is open up a phone book when you're in a
oh,
crisis mode and say, what am I going to do?
right, and make a wrong decision. Yeah, I mean, there's community respite programs. There's a variety of things that you can get. I think one thing that is important when it comes to thinking about engagement and socialization and things like that is, I would encourage, you to have a real conversation that's, you know, what does your loved one value? Where would they, succeed? So for example, if someone is a chatty Cathy, then maybe they would love an activity group or something like that. But maybe someone's a little more reserved. And if you put them in that type of activity, it could be detrimental, or have a negative impact on them. Maybe they would be more, into an art class that's more independent or, not a group thing. I absolutely, for me, I'm not a totally outgoing. I'm more shy, more reserved. So I don't know that if you put me in a big group setting that I would be someone that would thrive. And I think people forget about that. I hear them say, "Oh, mom needs to go to this or dad needs that kind of class." I agree they need something, but you got to find the right thing for them. And the great thing about down here is there is the right fit for everyone because we have tons of resources.
I've always wanted to try the wine and art thing. So
Oh,
I think, give me a little wine, I can
yeah.
probably paint anything. So,
Yeah, it's fun. You should do it.
yeah.
It's great. But yeah, so I think learning what's out there, but being honest with yourself and your loved one about what your social expectations and wishes are is important too.
So, episode 7, you shared a very interesting statistic about the number of seniors who are inactive and how that leads to isolation, depression, and how that increases the fall risk. So, can you share that with us?
Yes, absolutely. So I was just pulling that here. So the stat that we read was 74% of adults over 75 are classified as inactive. And that meant that there was a lack of physical activity or a lack of engagement outside of the home setting. And I thought that was sad.
It is very sad.
It's such a
So,
high number. And 74, I mean, nowadays we're living much older. So 74 is still a very young number.
So I think it's important that you take a look at your lifestyle and say, how am I positioning myself for success? And what can I do to um, help myself, physically, emotionally, nutritionally, what are my, what's important to me and how can I set up those, pillars of success to help me age successfully? And I, so I think we found during the COVID pandemic, people were isolated. They weren't meeting people. They weren't socializing. They weren't eating right, and people declined. They declined physically. They declined mentally, and so if we know that, and we know what happened, how can we set ourselves up for success? And maybe it's something where you know you find a group of friends and you go out and have dinner with your friends, or maybe it's finding some type of activity that you enjoy doing, or what can you do to set those things in place to help you age successfully.
Absolutely. I think what was interesting and it really tied with that statistic, specifically when we were speaking with Carly, was the lack of activity as we age has a big impact, whether that's on your isolation or your depression, but it's also impacting your muscle strength. And it's number one leading factor to falls. So, falls, there's a lot of things that can be done to prevent falls. And so, maintaining, a good activity regimen, whether that's some sort of exercise or walking, therapy. It's really important. It's important to think about those things as we age, and, inactivity has a much bigger impact than one would think.
We haven't really talked much about her episodes, but it was very informative. And to think that she is a mobile physical therapist, that she
Yeah.
can come to your home to do physical therapy. What a great resource,
Yeah.
to think that you don't have to, because you probably aren't going to be able to get load yourself into a car if you just had knee surgery or hip surgery, so and maybe you're not in a rehab facility, but to think that you could be at home and someone could come to your home to give you this
Oh,
therapy
yeah.
that you need to get you stronger. What a great thing.
Yeah, she does wonderful things for, all sorts of those things, and her services are great. So you should definitely check her page out. We have her linked on our resources page on our website. And there's so many things that she's doing around activity and helping seniors, stay stronger and healthier.
It's what we want.
Yes. Um, so the next thing on our list is exploring and understanding for financial costs. I think this is always kind of a tough one. And I was thinking about, as I was doing this, what's really the message with the financial aspect of aging. And there's so much we can talk about this. But for me, I thought that it really came down to being realistic and understanding your financial setup to what you can afford. If you're exploring communities, understanding, what that financial impact is. If you're exploring staying at home, what does that impact for? But incorporating that in your aging plan. People teach us, when I was in high school, we had home ec, so they would teach us how to do a checkbook and how to set up a retirement fund and how to, bake a meatloaf. And I don't think they do those things anymore. But from a young age, you're taught about retirement, but you're not taught about aging or the care needs or that. So you plan for, your financial aspect, after your working years, but you have to start including what your care needs are going to be. How do you support that? But having those honest conversations, and understanding that would be great. Personally, I would love, to live at Moorings Park. That place is beautiful. See the commercials. That's gorgeous. That's not in my budget. And I know that. But I have to be realistic about that. And I can't live in denial and just say, well, I'll figure something out when I'm older. I also can't say, well, I can afford home care and have no understanding what the cost is. So it's doing your research now and incorporating saving and planning for that in some capacity.
It's so true. It's so true. And saving for long-term care, not sexy,
No,
not
not at all.
not
Not
a
a
fun thing to
vacation.
do. No, but it's important. And so having the right insurance, having the if it's long-term care insurance or some type of program to help you pay for the care that statistically you're going to need is going to
Mhm.
be really important. I get so many calls from people who say, mom's on fixed income, help me find a place.
Yeah.
And so my question, my immediate question to that is, what does that mean? What is fixed income? How much is that?
Right.
Because one person's fixed income is one person's fixed income, and so we need to understand that piece of that. Um, I get stories, I get calls from people who are, they're renting a one-bedroom apartment and the landlord decided to sell, and mom's
Yeah.
on a fixed income and we need to find a place. And and so again, family needs to be involved in that way before
Oh,
mom's being kicked out of her place, because is mom going to move in with you?
right.
Can the kids kick in a little money? Does mom have a life insurance policy? Does mom have a long-term care policy? Is mom a spouse of a veteran?
Yeah.
So all these things are part of this equation. And so the financial piece of you know having that, preparing for that financial um, situation where you are going to need care is a huge component to this process.
Yeah, you have to, be doing your research and understanding the cost of things so that you're making, the decision that you want, but one that you can afford as well. I think when we're talking about things like long-term care insurance or veteran benefits, I feel like these are things people have and they forget they have them, or they've put them in a drawer and their kids don't know about them. So, make sure that you're keeping those documents somewhere safe. Make sure that you share that information with someone. There's lots of great resources that can help you financially. There's community programs. There's obviously, we've mentioned the veterans benefits. But there's also, how many times do we hear people saying, well, Medicare covers that? Medicare doesn't cover that. So, really understanding what you're looking for, what your expectations are, and then understanding the financial part of that, seeing if it's what you can afford, and budgeting that properly is very important.
Or, a very interesting topic is when people talk about Medicaid,
Mm.
and people are very confused between Medicare and Medicaid. And we're going to talk about that in season 2. But people think, I'm going to I'm going to go on Medicaid, and there are attorneys out there making a lot of money on Medicaid planning, and people go on Medicaid and then they need care and they can't find a place
Right.
that accepts Medicaid. And it's a huge, huge problem out there. And, unfortunately, the attorneys make a lot of money in this Medicaid planning, but they forget about where people are going to go.
Right.
And so it's important.
Yeah, you tied that right back into destination. It's like destination and financial go hand in hand.
They do.
Where do you want to live? Can you afford it? Can you afford it? Is that in your area? Those things really tie in. So, I know money, for people can be a tough topic, can be a tough subject, but it is something. And, I had someone ask me recently, like, what age should you start, thinking about long-term care insurance? And I was like, honestly, for me, I got it at 32. I started working in home care. I heard about it and I was like, oh my gosh, I never considered my aging needs at, in my 20s or early 30s. And so, I had, ironically had met Mitchell back then. And so had explored that, but, it's never too early to start. And you don't want to get out of retirement, be on, a fixed income like many people are, and then realize, oh, well, care is this and I can't afford that. So now I'm looking for what?
Well, many times people have to move out of this area.
Yeah.
They have to move to a bigger city. They have to move out, or
And that's tough.
it's very difficult.
Yeah.
So kind of tying into that, we had Ed Woolman, and he shared with us about preparing your legal documents. And to me, that it was a very interesting segment, and I thought he shared a lot of great information. And it's really interesting because my wife and I, we were with my father-in-law, and he had a will in his estate that he did 20 years ago, but his wishes are different now, and his
Mhm.
financial situation is different now. And so we sat down with the attorney just yesterday and worked through that. And yes, there's some sensitive topics. Yes, there's some moments where it's a little uncomfortable talking about where does he want to get buried, and does he want to have a clergy there, does he want all those things need to be part of that conversation. But we got done and we're like, wow, what a relief. and
Yeah.
and now it's all in a nice little binder, it's all nicely done, and it's all very clean. And so what a relief having getting your ducks in a row,
Yeah.
as Ed would say. I know in his segment he also I brought up about my dad, about people, who do all this research, and I had this expression about analysis paralysis. And so, it's a wonderful expression about, people who do research, and they do so much research that they get stuck in the mud because they can't, they have all these piles of all these different brochures of senior living communities, and they just, they get so overwhelmed. And this you gotta try to get out of that. And it's a great for someone who is just does, and I get it, some people really like to analyze everything and have the spreadsheets and everything, but there
Mm.
comes a point where you got to make a
You
decision.
do.
And there's that relief, when you make that decision, it's so great, because you've done your research, you've looked at all your different options, and this is my answer. And so, but some people get stuck with that, and you got to be really, really careful with that.
Great
um,
points. I think the other big thing that tied into that was really understanding the documents. People think that a POA or a power of attorney is this, or health surrogate is that, advanced directives. There's all these different documents, and it can be complex. It can be overwhelming, and it's great, to get them, to have them, and then make sure that you're revisiting that for, I think the advice we were given was, laws change, different things change, understanding that, keeping up with it. So checking in with your lawyer, reviewing those documents. If you have questions, really understand what that is and make sure that your wishes are spelled out how you want. And if they change, please update those.
And it doesn't matter how much money you have. You
Yeah,
can have a
no.
little money, you can have a lot of money, but you still need to, have your wishes
Go-
documented.
Excellent
And
point.
and I was thinking about, Ed's episode, and my expression about being 5 years too early rather than 5 minutes too late, is so um, applicable to everything that we do. And if you've ever seen my car, it's on the back of my car. That but it's so true that it's better to be 5 years too early than 5 minutes too late. And our podcast about pre-planning, about creating your strategy, all goes back to that it's better to be early and prepared and proactive rather than reactive and waiting for a crisis.
Yeah, I think when we were talking with him, I don't remember the exact stat off the top of my head, but I remember we talked about the number of people that have these types of documents prepared, and the number was really low. I think with all the stats, it's low, which drives down the point of why you got to do this stuff. But I was starting to think, like, why is that so low? Why don't people do it? And that was one of the questions I had asked, and Ed says, like, maybe that's finances, maybe that's denial, maybe that's thinking you don't have enough assets to need this type of stuff. Like you said, it doesn't matter what your situation is, a little or a lot or in between. You should have this. It's almost a gift you're giving your family. You're making those decisions and taking that burden off them. I'm an only child, so I guess maybe I don't have a sibling to, argue with or whatnot, but I don't ever want to have to make those wishes on behalf of my mom. So it's nice to know that she's made them for me, and I always envision that as a gift. So I think about it in that sense, and everyone should have it.
So we were talking, and I'm not sure which episode this was aired, but I remember talking about, I think it was Ed's segment, and we were talking about the death binder.
Yes.
And I know it has this whole thing about a death binder, but again, trying to protect your spouse in case something happens. And I created this binder, with all the important information in there. And my wife knows exactly where she can go to access this binder with all the critical information, with passwords and with people's names, and all that information is all in one little spot. And it's so important to have all those things together. And I know I'll visit people, and they have they'll say I'm a veteran, or I have a long-term care policy, but where is it?
Yeah.
And so, get all those things together, put it in a nice little folder, put a little bow on it, and make sure you got, it's all in one safe spot where someone knows where all that is.
I think the best advice we could give is to have that information available and nicely put together. It's very important. Well, kind of wrapping things up, the last of our topics here is the downsizing topic. So last but certainly not least, there was so much that we talked about with downsizing, and there were a couple things that really struck me in a different way that I really hadn't given thought before to. And so as we think about downsizing, from, my perspective, I think about my mom, and my mom has all this Christmas china. I mean, we've got sets of it for everything.
I just want to say hi, Mom, if you're ever listening. So hi, Mom.
Hi, Kitty. Run faster on the elliptical. But like, I don't want the china. And I remember, sitting here with Marlon saying to her, I tell my mom all the time, I don't want it. And I got thinking, I'm being pretty dismissive. I don't want the china, but I shouldn't just be like, no, I don't want it. I think we need to remember that whatever the stuff is that either we have or our spouse has or a parent, those things are tied to a memory. Maybe they bought it somewhere, or it's a big table and they remember a Thanksgiving dinner, a plate that they bought on a trip they went to Italy or whatever. I think it's responsible to say, Mom, I don't want it. But I think it's also kind to listen to the story behind it. And then I think there are times that we do inherit things, one way or another. Maybe they don't downsize, and then you have all this stuff, and then it's just stuff, and it's important. So that was one that I thought hit home for me in that episode.
Well, and I know I shared the story with my dad, who collected pens and had pens from all over the world. And when he passed, my brother and I got these pens in a box. And I still have this box, but there's no meaning behind it, because it would have been much better for him to be able to sit down with my brother and I to go through. Hey, I got this pen from France, and it's a Mont Blanc,
Yeah.
and this has happened here, and I'm definitely afraid to put a fountain pen in my pocket, and it's going to explode. And so, wouldn't it have been a much better experience to say, hey, this is how you do it, and this is that, and what a gift you could give your kids or your grandkids to share those experiences with them, versus the truck coming to get rid of everything.
Yeah, it's so important to remember that memories matter, and to do that. And I think that from an adult child's perspective, when we think about downsizing for our parents, it's just junk we don't want. We have to remember that that's not junk to them. It was a part of their life, and that really hit me. I think when we think about downsizing in general, it's something that whether you're wanting to stay in your home or go to a community or move to a smaller home or move up north or move in with your kids, the reality is we need to start thinning things down. And I think it's important to, start that. I also loved that when you work with a professional organizer, downsizing, expert and all these things, they're very thoughtful about it. So thinking about ways to get you in your environment to live and to function safely. Nothing should be too high or too low. Marla was very wise in thinking about how she helps set up someone's space so that they can live, safely and independently. I loved her. The goal is that you're not on a step stool or a ladder, anything like that, because those are just horrifically unsafe for everyone. So I think downsizing, it has such a sad connotation to it at times, but it can really be a positive experience. You share the story of the pens. It makes me think, my dad has all these stamps, these books of stamps, and not allowed to touch them. You got to wear gloves and have the tweezers. I don't know. But I always say, I don't have siblings, so I don't know where those are going to go, when he passes. And, I'm not necessarily into stamps. But it got me thinking, I would love to know where they're from. How did he get into stamps, right? Was this something? So, that was something that really moved me. And maybe it's not something you want to inherit, but maybe getting to know a little more about that can be a bond or a moment or a connection. And I loved that her overall theme was that experiences matter more than things.
So true. And remember, she said, start in the laundry room.
Yes.
And so I remember I asked her, where should people start? And she said, start in the laundry room, because you don't have any emotions with stuff in your laundry room.
Yeah.
And so it was great. I thought, start in the garage or start in the junk drawer.
Yeah.
But it was laundry room, which kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. It's funny. When we were going, I was like, oh, I wonder, do you start in the linen closet or something, whatever. And then I went that day to find her on social media. And it was so funny because she posts these before and afters or whatever. And she always starts with the laundry room. And I thought, it really is smart, because you do have connections to things in other places of the home. But I don't really think we're really connected to Tide.
No.
You can throw it away. I'm okay.
No. And for me, I know, we just organized our garage and everything. I find it very liberating, to know that things are organized. When I walk into my garage or my closet and things are organized, I enjoy that, and so maybe that's just who I am, but I like things that are organized and have a place. And
see, I need a professional organizer for the extreme version, which is I love to purge. I mean, I'll just throw stuff away just to throw stuff away. And then it's where's, whatever. Well, you probably threw it away. So I need someone that kind of can rope me in a little to be like, maybe you shouldn't be throwing those knives away. You might want to cut a steak one day. But so yeah, I loved, she has a wonderful business. I think the services, I love that she really does it with heart. And I think that this is such a touchy subject for so many people. I'm sure my mom is, crying at the idea that I don't want her china. But it's true. Like, kids don't want all that stuff. You can throw away the hand turkey I drew when I was 7. I'm not putting that on my fridge. It's not going to hurt my feelings. But you got to have those conversations and give your parents the respect of going through that process, because it is grieving a loss of something.
So I'm not sure if I shared it during the episode, but I had this copper fondue pot, and I just like, man, I could never part with this thing. It was a copper fondue pot, and my wife said, Bruce, we got to get rid of stuff. And so she said, what about the fondue pot? I'm like, man, it's copper. And, and she said, Bruce, when was the last time we've had fondue? And like, I've never used it. And it's like, this thing was like brand new, but I just like, it was beautiful. And St. Matthew's House.
Yeah.
Gave it to St. Matthew's House. Haven't thought about it since.
Yeah. And you know what? I bet someone is loving it to death.
I hope
that's
so.
the thing there. I want stuff to go to a great home where someone's going to love it. And you know what? There's someone out there that probably really wanted to have a fondue party. So I bet they're living it up.
I'm hoping that with the lava lamp.
Yeah. That, and someone's going to have really nice china for all the holidays, but it won't be me.
When experience matters the most, Senior Housing Solutions uses over 30 years of industry knowledge to provide expert advice for those considering a move to a senior living community. We are the matchmakers of senior housing. Call today at 239-595-0207 for your free consultation.
All right. Well, welcome to Checkmate, our final segment of our final episode of season 1. That's just so shocking to me to feel like we've completed our first season. So as we kind of wrapped up today, there's so much I think we could do, but if we just wrapped it all into one little message, what would you say our overall message is?
I would say it's chess, not checkers. And what do we mean by that? And I think when I think about that, I think that, chess involves strategy and chess involves a plan. And I know, like the things that we have been talking about, these are, tough topics, very tough topics and sensitive topics. And, and I don't want people to get overwhelmed by all of this, because it could become overwhelming. And so as I start thinking about this, and the purpose of our podcast is to help educate people, help people pre-plan so they can create a strategy. I want people to, kind of take a step back and, take a breath and enjoy life and, smile and laugh and, because life is short. And so, yes, you want to plan. Yes, you want to have a strategy, but we gotta take time to smell the roses too. And so spend time with your kids, spend time with your spouse, travel, do all those things, but, develop a plan, but, take a breath.
Yeah, I love that. So play chess, not checkers. I like it. Well, I can't believe that we're wrapping up this episode and this season. I really have to thank you. This was a dream I've had for a long time, and it would have never come to life without you. I think my favorite part about this is that we have a passion for what we both do individually, professionally, and this has been such a great way to bring that together. I wonder from like the listeners' perspectives if they ever think like, wait a second, you've got one guy over here that does housing, you've got the girl that does home care, but yet you've come together to do this. And I think, yeah, that's actually the point. I know I love home care, just like you love housing, but I know home care isn't for everyone. And I want the best outcome for people as they age. And I think that's where we have that common ground. And I think it's been so fun to do this and to learn to be podcasters and to connect and build a community in a different way has been so fun. So I'm excited to see what
it's great. It's great doing this with you as well, Susan. And this would never happen without you. And I always, I always think that I want to be a resource to people. And I always say, I have a toolbox of different people that I can, go into my toolbox and say, okay, you need this, I have that person. And to be able to invite them to be part of our podcast, it's just an awesome experience because they have a lot to share. They're passionate, they're caring. And, so I think that's been very exciting to see all this happen together. I know, like our, season two, I know what's going on in season two, and it's very exciting. And so, I'm very excited about, moving forward, and so it's, on one side, it's a little sad because their season one's ends, but, season two starts. And so we're thrilled to be part of this. I want to thank all of our guests for, coming and being part of our journey together and sharing their knowledge and their passion about what they do. It's just a great thing I think that we're offering. And, I know the response that we've had so far has been overwhelming. And so I would encourage more people to listen and to give us feedback. So we appreciate all that.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about this is that, it really is tailored to all audiences, whether you're in the healthcare profession or you're an adult child or you're, a senior yourself or a spouse or whatnot. The information is for everyone. Everyone is touched by the aging journey in some way. So we're here to help everybody navigate those conversations. And yes, we've dropped hints about season 2 so much through this episode. So we are so excited. We will absolutely be having a season 2. It will be launching in the fall of this year. So we're very excited for that. It's packed full of great guests. We have amazing content. I'm really excited to have some of the speakers that we've booked in topics that we know, and then topics that we're, getting so many requests from the listeners. So we're diving into that and, just really looking forward to sharing more with you. So continue to tell us what you want to hear about so we can bring that content to you.
And please join us on all the social media platforms, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok. We're there. We're everywhere. And we have a great website, the aginggamepodcast.com. I also want to do a special thank you to Ben Villa.
Yes.
And, he's our digital marketer, and this would not have happened without our friend Ben. 239 Studio. You guys have been great here. Doing something in this professional setting is so nice and really kind of makes it a great experience as well. So we have our website people from Total Concepts are a part of this as well. So there's a lot of behind the scenes people. So we appreciate all of you.
Yeah, this wouldn't have been doable to this level without the great team that we have, behind what you see in just the two of us. So we're very appreciative to all of them and their wonderful movie magic, making us look and sound good. So I think that's it for season 1. Cheers to a wonderful first season, and we'll see you all in season 2.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media. You can also find more information and resources at www.theaginggamepodcast.com.